Being a parent is a high calling and it's deeply rewarding. I'm your host, Natalie Mann. I'm a mom of 6, so I know firsthand that parenting is full of challenges. Welcome to Rooted Parenting. I'm here to help you to honor God as a parent and to raise your kids to know and to love Jesus. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about making your own family culture, and my guests are Helen and Scott Schleper. I'm really excited to have them here on the show. It's the first time we have a parent couple, so welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us. Scott is a high school teacher here at SPH, and Helen is stepping into the role as head of school. And so I'd love it if each of you could just tell me a bit about yourselves.
My name is Scott, and I teach grades 11 and 12. I'm a DP economics teacher. I teach theory of knowledge, and then I teach Bible. Married to Helen, and we are parents to a 9th grader and a 10th grader, which is a crazy thought. And we've been here in Indonesia for 6 years now. We're just starting our 7th year in Indonesia. Before that, we spent 5 years in Cambodia, and our family got started actually in California.
Great.
Hi, I'm Helen Schleper, and I'm excited to be the head of school at SPH LV. And I love SPH LV, not because I serve here, but my husband teaches here, and my 2 children are here, and I'm so thankful for the colleagues that I get to work with every day. We have been married for 16 years, and we are going on year 23 in our time in education. So we still feel very, very humble, and the fact that it's not that we have all the answers for parenting and all of our answers in education, but we feel very thankful and called to be here and to be raising our children.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, that's one thing that is worth stating is that none of us feel like experts as parents. And if we did, then we'd probably not be qualified. So we're definitely talking from our own experience and just trying to glean and learn from each other. And I've been thinking about how we all create a family culture, especially when we're early in our marriage. And I think back to when I first visited Matt's family, my husband, Matt, his family. We were early marriage, and everybody was sitting around in a room, and everybody picked up a book, and they all sat down to read. And I felt so out of place because that was not something that my family did. It's not that my family didn't read, and it's not that they didn't value reading, but I had never been in a family room with a number of people all sitting down being quiet together. And I learned, I better get myself a book next time. And also that was my first inkling that we are so different. Even though we have a lot in common, we've grown up with families with different values, different cultures. So when you first got married, you probably noticed those differences. Can you talk about maybe something that your parents did really well that you chose to continue as your own family unit?
Sure. So I grew up in a home where we did go to church on Sunday, but it wasn't necessarily like every day that we would talk about God. But I am very thankful that my parents did emphasize, we're going to go to church as a family. So very thankful for that. We didn't always eat together because my parents worked a lot. And so I remember sometimes it was just my brother, my sister, and I, we would just eat dinner. But that was normal to us because I know my parents were busy working. But that is something then I wanted to change when we had a family. But I am thankful for my parents, their values for, hard work. That was always emphasized that we're going to work really hard, whether at school or whether in their jobs, and their desire that that their desire for us to do well in education. So that was very important, that they knew they wanted all of us to go to university. So, those were the positives.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that my parents did well that maybe I wanted to continue on is related to what Helen said, is we ate dinner together every night. And then it's closely related to that. We did things together. It was very clear that my parents were always very involved in our lives. They knew where we were at academically. They kind of continued to have those conversations with us as long as they could. And then they got involved in whatever we were doing. And so I played sports, and so my dad coached, and he practiced with me and spent a lot of time with me. And so I think those are maybe some of the things that I took from my own childhood, then, that I think we made an effort to add those into our own family norms.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So you're talking about meal times being important. Walk me through, or just pretend that I'm a CCTV and you're in your kitchen or your living room, wherever you eat. Walk me through what sort of a dinner conversation looks like. What are the things that come up, or why is it valuable, that time around the table for you?
So one of the great things is just, even when they're younger, we would just pray before the meal. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, it was mostly just Scott and I taking turns. But as they've gotten older, so we all just take turns. And it's not necessarily like, oh, do I have to? We just ask who would like to pray, and one of the boys will usually volunteer. And, we will also pray. So that's just a nice start. And again, it's not, when we have guests, it's just, we say, oh, who's going to pray? And one of the kids will volunteer.
Yeah.
And then during the mealtime, it's mostly around school. They want to tell us about their day at school, whether they had a difficult assessment or something happened in PE. But it's just a fun time for all of us to catch up. Like, this is what happened during our school day.
Yeah.
I'd say it's definitely lighthearted.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very lighthearted. I think we just kind of enjoy each other. We enjoy being together for that time. We find things to laugh about. I think that's what you'd see if you were looking in.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because that sort of points to the idea that we enjoy each other, we delight in each other. So when we get to the table, it's a happy time of the day, right? We get to reconnect, regroup, catch up. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I mean, it's messy, right?
Yeah.
There's still food falling all over the table, and it's not.
Yeah. And sometimes we do have to remind them of table manners.
We have that in our house too. Yeah. I found when our kids were little that sometimes it was good. Matt would come up with just questions to get them thinking, even silly things. Who do you think would win, a dolphin or a shark? Or, that kind of thing, to get them, so that when they got to the older stages, we might ask them bigger questions like, what do you look for in a good friend? Or, if you had to pick between a husband who is rich or kind, which would you pick? It kind of ends up being those opportunities to talk more broadly about life. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys find that too? Do you?
Yeah. So, or sometimes we'll talk about something, maybe we'll talk about, they'll want to say, oh, this happened in sports today, right? And then we can see, is it something, was it a character issue, right? A baseball player got really angry, and then we can talk about that. We can talk about okay, what was wrong with that? What happened? So some of our dinner conversations, it might be light, but then it can also go deeper later on, especially if it's just, we need to maybe talk with, just one, not both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been really blessed that we've had other couples whose kids were a little bit older, that we've had a chance to kind of see and learn what they do and observe. And so I think maybe even more than what we brought in from our own childhoods, I think it was more of observing maybe our pastor and how things work in his home, right? He was a little further along than we were, right? Or friends who had kids before we did. But I'm just reminded, there's an awesome couple that we spent time with, an awesome family that we spent time with. And they had entered a season of life where their kids weren't as open. And so she had these little game cards that she would use to then ask questions at the dinner table, the kinds of things that I think you're describing Matt asking, right? And so fortunately, up to this point, we haven't necessarily needed that kind of scripted help. And Helen's good at just drawing the boys out. But I could see that there are maybe seasons where you need a game card that asks a silly question to get the conversation started. Maybe that's coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I think that, so we actually went to their house, and then they said whenever they have guests, sometimes their kids will,
Clam up.
yeah, which is understandable, right? So then she literally had a jar, and then you pick a question, and some of them are silly, some of them are, a little bit more serious, like, what are qualities that you look for in a friend? And so I just thought, oh, that's so great that they have that there. So when they invite people, their kids aren't just quiet, and then it can get the conversation going.
Yeah.
When they took out the jar, the player's like, "Oh, Mom," right? But it was so clear that it was an insincere complaint.
Right.
It was something that they're like, they've spent a lot of time with that jar, and it's been a reason for them to have meaningful conversation together.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think that sort of helps to clarify that as parents, we do need help. Like you're talking about looking to other couples. We do that too, right? You look for people who are older. When our kids were very young, I remember we actually gathered, I think it was four or five couples to our house because their kids were already teenagers to adults and they all had kept the faith. They all had solid foundation. And so we thought, well, this is our moment, and we gathered them one night and said, we just want to hear what you did. What are the things that matter to you? And we heard very different advice from each couple, but it helped us so much because our kids were so young. We thought, we know that's one of our main goals is that when our kids grow up, when they become teens and eventually leave us, that their faith in Christ is solid and these people obviously did something right. And so, yeah, I think, and also it kind of reminds us that it's okay if we need to go look for outside help. Because I definitely felt when our first two kids left home, our family dinner dynamic changed so dramatically that I did sometimes feel like it was a lot harder because those two kids brought a lot of conversation and, information to the table. They'd come with lots to say. And so there was a season where Matt and I had to stop and think, how do we get these kids? It's not that they don't want to talk, but maybe we're asking the right questions and so we're still learning. It's not like we figured it out and it's a done deal. We love dinner time. We do love dinner time, but there was a season, especially if Matt was out of town and then I would be all by myself trying to create conversation with everybody. I'd feel like I'm not so good at this. But I guess one of the main takeaways is that parenting does take effort and it takes intentionality. We have to choose to engage. We don't just say, they're teenagers. I guess we just let them look on their phones and dinner ends and we clean up, right? I guess your friends, when they had that jar, they're also coaching their kids to have skills, to have conversations with people they've never met before, that's a skill. Somebody has to teach you that. It doesn't come naturally to everybody. Yeah. What about the difference between when they're young versus when they're getting older? How do you prioritize spending time with them and maintaining a connection with your kids so that you feel like you have a strong relationship? Can you think of practical things that you've done differently from when they were young to when they were older?
I think we've had it easy in some ways in that our boys really enjoy sports, and I do as well. And so at a young age, I played ball with them, and as they got a little bit older, I played ball with them, and now I play ball with them. Like that's been, I think, a really great thing for us, and I feel so blessed that is such kind of just an easy thing that we have that we're able to do together. And so we come up to school in the evening and we play baseball together. And I think just I sometimes feel like, I'm getting away with something right now. Just that we have like these precious moments that we can do this together. And looking back, that was what my father did with me as well. And so I know it started with my father, right? And I realized that, this is a great way to continue to, like you're talking about those connections. So it's not just a matter of being in the same place at the same time, but really being able to be a part of their lives and participate in something that's really important to them. And again, that's what my dad was doing, being involved in something that mattered to us. And And so then being able to continue that with them. So that's been kind of an easy one. We've talked about meals, but it's more than just meal time, right?
Yeah.
Like in the evening when there's time, being able to play a game together. When we travel, we travel together, we do things together, and it's such a small thing, but even just we bring a deck of cards with us and we play card games in the room at night and things like that. So I think those are some of the practical ways in which we've been able to spend time together and enjoy each other.
Yeah. And, when they're younger, right, you are trying, I was always thinking like, I have to go, I want them to learn the alphabet, things like that. So we have blocks, but, there's toys. But as they get older, right, there's not necessarily like a toy or, there are board games, but, it's more for me. I'm not playing baseball with them, but then sometimes like in the summer, like then I can grab, they'll hit baseballs. And so I can go and pick up the balls for them. Right. And just be out there with them still. But a lot of the time it's like, I just chat with them. I think being at school, like I do know their friends, and so we'll just talk about something funny that happened in class. And it's just, I think, listening to them ever since they were little, right? About, oh, this happened today, or, there's a really hard test. What am I going to do? And so we just listen, ask questions, and talk with them. I think one thing when they were younger, something that I didn't do as a family was a family devotion. And so I didn't grow up with that. We did go to church, but we didn't have these family devotions. And so I remember when I was single, and one of my friends, she came from just a really solid Christian home. And so on their board, it said family devotion at 7:00, and I was like, you guys do this? She's like, yeah. She's like, we've been doing this forever. And I thought, wow, that's so awesome. And then our pastor at that time, again, I think was I pregnant? I might've been pregnant. We went over to their house and he said, you guys can stay for the family devotion after dinner. And so we said, okay. And their kids were still young. They had like toddlers. And so I'm not sure. I think there was some fighting going on.
Yeah.
There was some food, some of them were still eating and the food was spilling. And, but they sang a song and they read from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And honestly, it was messy. And I was thinking, like, are these kids even paying attention? Yeah. But he was telling us that, some days are better than others. And so we're glad that we got to see the messy. Because then we're like, okay, the kids aren't just like, just listening to your, there's like touching going on, food, food on the floor. But it was just great to see that, so that when we started, then we knew, okay, it's not going to be perfect. The kids aren't, a two-year-old or a 3-year-old. They're not going to be like, let me ask you a question. When you said Jesus turned the water into wine, right? They're not going to say those things. But you're creating this, very good, healthy habit, right? And it's like time together, but it's time together in the Word, right? And I'm so thankful that, we're not musical people. And so they sang a song, we're like, but none of us play instruments. Do we do a YouTube? And then we just said, we're just going to sing a song a cappella. So we found, we found like 2 songs and we sing it in the beginning and sing it at the end. And then you read from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And again, in the beginning, again, they were a little bit just all over the place. But then over time, it just, that routine is there. And then now that they're older, we can actually read from the Bible, or Scott will find a book that we'll read, and then they can actually read, they can ask questions, we can ask them questions. So it's really wonderful that we're at a state where we can communicate, it's not just one way, but we can all participate. And it's great that at the end, like, we can pray together, right? And they can also pray for us. We're saying, tomorrow's going to be a really hard day. Can you pray, pray for me? I'm going to have to give a presentation, or, Dad has, he's got to give several exams or something. So we can pray for each other, because I think it's really great for them to know we don't have everything together, and we truly, truly need God. Yeah.
That was huge. Yeah. It was huge, just being able to see another family do it. And I still remember, like, their kids were like sprawled out on the floor. I mean, it was so messy, but he communicated to us that it mattered, and so we tried it from early on, and even at a fairly young age, the kids would ask, when are we going to do family worship, right? Yeah. Like, maybe we would get home late or something like that. And they'd say, well, we're still going to do family worship, right? So we realized that was a rhythm that they valued as well. There's something else that I was gonna add to it here, but it's definitely changed over time. We've been able to improve upon it, and I think we've used it as an opportunity maybe to help them become familiar with like songs, right? And so we've sang the same songs for years, to the point now where we don't need to look at the lyrics, right? Yeah. And the hope is that something in the future happens, they don't know where to turn. They know that they can only turn to their Creator, to their Savior, and they could pray, they could sing, they could maybe depend upon some of those things that maybe they're equipped with. And then I think we found early, I think it turned out to be a really sweet tradition that we can still do now, even all these years later, is when we wanted to teach them to pray, we just did thank you prayers. And we wanted to show that you don't have to have a long prayer. You don't have to have a perfectly articulated prayer. And so it's just as simple as, we would go around and everyone would just say, thank you for the baseball game today. Yeah. And then all of us would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then the next person would say, thank you for our grandparents. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right? We would just go around. Cool. And I thought that was something that was maybe just we would outgrow, but that's kind of stuck with us, and that it can be prayer and worship can be, it doesn't need to be a production. It needs to be sincere rather than a production. And that is, I'm so thankful for those families that we were able to observe who were further along than we were. And that's still largely part of our kind of family rhythms.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We were the same. We didn't grow up with that, or I did not grow up with that. And having families let us go into their homes and getting to see that it was far from perfect, but it was consistent. So then it kind of taught us, well, we can put this effort in too. It seemed like a really foreign concept at first until we just saw it played out and realized it doesn't have to be incredibly lengthy. It doesn't have to be super well prepared. There are days when we sit down and Matt will look at me and say, did you get something that you wanted to share out of this scripture? Because now we read the same passage each day. And yes, sometimes we have to lean on each other. But in the end, you're right. I feel like it creates a character in our kids where they understand that at the center of our lives is the Word of God. And when everything that we do is going to have to come back to this. And our parents are not putting on a show, like you said. It's not a production. They don't have the same prayer that they pray every night. It's coming from their heart. And so they start to learn that even prayer, you're taught it, but you're taught basically by doing. And rather than telling your child, you go figure out how to pray, you just do it together. And it becomes very natural. It doesn't feel strange, and they don't feel like they have to prepare something and write it all out and make sure it's perfect, right? So yeah. And I do remember times when our kids were really young, I could see, let's say that our oldest son was completely engaged and our second child looked like nothing was going in, right? And so it's true. You really have to persist through those seasons where it doesn't look like anything is happening, because we can't see the heart, right? We don't know what the Lord is doing, but he does say that his word doesn't come back void. So he's always at work. And I think the challenge for us is to remember the opportunities that we're given and not to, I don't want to say waste, but I think as I get older, I realize we do have a lot of minutes in a day. And sometimes I'm convicted that, well, did I really use it? Are the kids hearing the important messages? Am I, like you're saying, spending time, like what you said about your dad, right? When your dad spent all that time and went to all your games, he communicated love to you. He communicated that you are important to him. And sometimes those are even just the basic things that we need to remind ourselves as parents, because oftentimes we feel like we have to get things right, get the work done, provide for them, that there are these things we have to do, but that is separate from the relationship. And I think kids feel that, right? They know that if we're working, but we're not actually stopping to talk to them, then they don't feel as well loved as when we actually are craving time with them or prioritizing time with them. Yeah,
for sure.
Those minutes are limited, right?
Yeah.
Like we have so many minutes with our kids, but at the same time, they are really limited. And so there's a teacher that sometimes when I'm talking to him, it's Mr. Doug. He's an English teacher. And sometimes he'll say, Scott, 80 short years, 80 short years. It's all we got, right? And so we're talking about some kind of a struggle. But I think recently I've been convicted of, sure, there's those 80 short years, but there's also these 18 short years, right? And so when I'm saying goodnight, that final goodnight to the boys at night, I think recently I've been more convicted of not 80 short years, but we've got 18 short years in which we can pour into our kids, we can point them to Christ, we can equip them to know and love God and be consistently turning to God. And there's no greater ministry or that's awesome. That's awesome. But it is short and it's easy to get caught up in other things. And it happens to us as well. It just getting distracted by all these other things that seem like they're maybe more important.
Yeah.
But those minutes and those years are limited and they're sweet and they're precious. And I'm thankful that we've been given them.
I was trying to think about maybe some parents, maybe they didn't do the family devotions early on, right? Because we only did that because we're just so thankful that our pastor and some other people said, come into our home. And, or else I wouldn't have known what to do. We wouldn't have known. So I'm just thinking, so for some parents who their children are maybe older, they can still start, right? They're not using the Jesus Storybook Bible, but there are so many great devotional books that if you feel, and you can, read the Bible and you can, but if you feel like maybe you need help, because a lot of devotional books do have scripture and then, the author writes something. There are really great ones for teens that you could just read and discuss. And it could be during dinner. It could be right after dinner, just depending on the family. And so, and I think, you might feel like I've got it. Of course, we want to do this daily, but it's also okay if you just, if you do start out like, okay, let's try this on whatever day that works for families, right? So maybe that is Sunday night, or maybe that's Monday night. I don't know, but I think maybe making that effort, I'm just saying it's never too late.
Yes.
Right? It's never too late. And for us too, sometimes we get busy, there's things at night, and so then, okay, we didn't do it this time, then we want to try tomorrow, and that's okay. Yeah. Because there's a perfectionist in me too that's like, we should be scheduled, everything should be, perfect, but the reality is it's not, but we can always still try and make an effort and be intentional.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of comfort knowing that there are new beginnings every day.
Yes.
Because if we spend too much time looking back and thinking, I wish I had done it differently, we're kind of stuck there and we're not able to progress and realize, well, the Lord, his mercies are new every morning. So that means that even if we have gotten out of habits that we think are worth having, we can reestablish. And sometimes I think as families, we need a restart. We might say, we have gotten too busy, or we have not prioritized time as a family as much as we want to, and we're going to rework this. We have that, the freedom to do that. So I guess that's my final question for you is, can you think of a season where things went a little bit astray, and then how do you reclaim your family time as a priority, but also, like we've been talking about, your goal as parents to really shepherd your kids?
I feel like anytime we're both really busy with work, right, then it is, it's like, let's eat a quick dinner and I've got to get to work and I've got to prepare this presentation or, your lessons. I feel like do you feel like that's like
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And then sometimes, our families, like our parents are in the US, right? And then something happens there.
Yeah.
So right now it's like, great, something's happening over there. I'm at a high stress time. And so it's easy to just be like, okay, you've eaten, you've done your homework. Okay, see you. Good night. Like it is, like, and they're older, so they are fine. But we are reminded that, we want to speak truth. We want to point them to Christ. Because the reality is the world is sharing things, right? So if I'm not talking about some serious topics, then the world is sharing, the world is sharing their opinions. And so they are hearing, they're just hearing things from social media or from even maybe some friends, right? Who are young in their age and maybe they're not hearing the truth. And so that is hard when we get super busy and we're tired and we're not getting enough sleep. And so then usually something will happen though, something will happen. It'll be, and we believe it's from the Lord. And then we say, okay, we're off rhythm. And we have to get back. Do you want to?
Yeah. And I think we will, when that happens, we'll even come back, like small and like, hey, we've let some time go. We need to be a family that prays together, right? And so tonight we're just going to, each of the four of us is going to share a prayer request, and one person will pray for that, right? So maybe that's tonight. That's how we're going to get moving back in that direction again, right? Tomorrow maybe we can sing a song before we pray for each other. The night after, okay, now we can get into our usual norms. The songs we sing, these are the prayers we say. This is how we engage with the Word. And so there's that knowledge, and again, maybe it's those 18 short years, but there's that awareness of, I have something that's so important and I'm not doing it, and this needs to be done. And you use the word reclaim, right? Like we need to reclaim those precious minutes. We need to come before the Lord together, the four of us, and again, it doesn't need to be a big production. You don't need to be trained in it. And I think, you're speaking earlier, even for a family that maybe hasn't been doing it or hasn't done it before, right? Like at some point, the kids are so helpful in it, right? Like they can help identify what's a song we could sing together.
True.
And kind of doing those things together as a family. But there is that awareness of I have this very important ministry at home, and I'm choosing my work over that, and I need to just take even these few minutes, pray with my family, read, sing, and make sure that it's clear that we love them and we love the Lord.
Yeah, I was reading about how new families will often create, this is not something we did when we were early in our marriage, but they'll create a mission statement, which to me sounds very formal. But then the idea is that it can be extremely basic. It's just love God, serve others, and so you're kind of saying the same thing, every day we're going to have demands on our time. We're going to get busy. It's easy for our priorities to get off track. And yet if we have this main goal, then we can always come back and just say, hey kids, that week was just too busy. We didn't prioritize time with each other, or we didn't pray together in the way that we want to, but we're starting again. And I guess that's one of the best privileges, is that you're saying it's true. We have this precious gift of our kids and responsibility and oversight over them. But we don't want to get overwhelmed by it. We want to know that, the Lord is faithful. Anytime we turn to him, he will turn back to us. And so it's just a matter of being honest and saying, we're trying. We're not always getting it right, but we definitely want to do this together. And we want our kids at the end of the day to feel like this home is a safe place. This home is a place where I want to be. This is where I'm loved. This is where I'm taught to love others. And I love hearing about how you have done that as a family and as a couple, and just really thankful that you were willing to chat with me today about it. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that just as you're saying that, just that reminder of like, I'm also thankful that I get to do this with Helen, right? And that this is something that we can do together as a team. It's not a matter of they're your responsibility or they're my responsibility, but let's figure out what are the ways in which we parent well, and let's work together as a couple to do this. And so I'm also really thankful that God has blessed us in this way and allowed us to do this together as a couple.
Yeah, high calling, and yeah, we need each other, that's for sure. Yeah. Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us on Rooted Parenting. I'm here to help you to honor God as a parent and to raise your kids to know and to love Jesus. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and you'll be notified when a new episode is released. Also, feel free to share with a friend. We want to inspire, equip, and encourage parents. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. In the next episode, I'll be talking with Angeline Ong about setting your child up for success.